Jerry Calron?
You're right.
All right. An emergency management coordinator, correct?
Right.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Stuff, talking about the stuff going on right here in Fairfield, Iowa. My name's Scott Holderbaum. I am the station manager for Fairfield Public Access Television. You're either watching us today on Lisco, Channel 9, Mediacom, Channel 9, or on the web at fairfieldpublicaccess.net. My guest today is Jerry Calron, the Emergency Management Coordinator. Jerry, how are you today?
Very good.
Welcome to Stuff, and well, that's a really cool title, but tell me what you do as an Emergency Management Coordinator, Jerry.
Well, a little bit of everything, it seems like. Every day is different. You never know what's going to come up, who you're going to have a meeting with, whether it be hazmat or fire or a police issue. We get into just a little bit of everything in trying to, well, keep the area ready for whatever may come up.
Now, what qualifies as an emergency?
The exact definition gets very basic. Right down to if you're backing your car up in Hy-Vee and back into one of their parking lot lights and call the law center for an officer to exchange information. That meets the technical requirements of a disaster, but obviously that's very easily handled.
I would say that's a lot easier than something, say, citywide.
Right, exactly. The Parkersburg tornado, that comes to the other end of the spectrum.
Wow. So that would be something on the very severe scale.
Yes.
So how does, do you just, what better question is, how do you go about coordinating the efforts? Because if a lot of people wanted to do their own thing and just kind of run willy-nilly, it would seem that a lot of people would want to do exactly what they wanted to, but may not solve the problem at hand.
Exactly. In managing a disaster, we pretty much have to try and keep everyone going the same general direction under the same resources that we get from the state, the federal government, locally, wherever it might come from.
Okay.
And our goal is to try and get some form of normalcy as soon as possible.
Okay. So what kind of disasters has Fairfield faced so far, and what are we prepared for?
Such things as a couple of years ago, the fire on the south side of the square, the fire on the east side of the square. We've had a white powder incident in one of the agencies. And again, we try and keep things as normal, so a lot of times, obviously a fire is pretty high profile. The white powder issue, we kept that very quiet. People didn't really need to know about it that weren't involved in it in some way.
It's interesting because from the viewpoint of just a citizen of Fairfield, a police cruiser is a very visible thing, an ambulance or a fire truck. But it sounds like there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make all these things work together that, just from the perspective of my front yard, I may not see.
Right. Right now we're in the closing stages of a incident safety officer class we've got firemen, we've got two of the sheriff's office there, two of the police department there.
Okay.
We've got some medical people going to it so that they can go to a scene and be alert to the needs of the responders to stay safe while they're doing it. There's a tendency of a responder going to a disaster of having narrowed vision. They're very interested in their goal of, well, saving people, saving property. They get focused on that and tend to miss other things. They tend to risk themselves to protect the other things.
Wow.
And so the safety officer basically stands back and watches the responders. And if someone is doing something unsafe or something is needed to be safer, they step in and say, hey, we've got to do this. And those are the kind of things that you won't see. It won't be in the paper, it won't be known by the public.
See, that's amazing, because that would be very hard to, our natural tendency is to see something and then want to do something about it.
Right.
But what you said is very true. We tend to develop a tunnel vision and a very narrow focus on what we want to do and miss a lot of other things on the way. I remember hearing something recently with the disaster that happened in Haiti, where everybody wanted to send all kinds of things. And I was listening to a radio program where they said 80% of the supplies that people want to send, if not gone through proper disaster management. That's nice that you sent it, but it wasn't what we needed. And so it's going to sit there and be unused, and then people can be offended because, well, my contribution wasn't used. Well, I appreciate that, but that's not what we needed right now.
Right, you're exactly right. Resource management is an entire course of study that we have. A good example would be at the Oklahoma City bombing. One of the responders was on television and commenting on the rapid method that they deployed to it. He commented that we don't even have hard hats for all of the responders that are going through the rubble. And there was an elderly lady somewhere, I don't know who, and God bless her, she saw that and thought, here is something I can do. And within a short period of time, here is a straight truck pulling up to the site full of football helmets. And I mean, it was done in absolutely the best attitude.
Incredible, great intention.
Exactly. And the only problem is that type of a helmet was not proper for what they were doing.
Oh, wow.
And they couldn't use them. And it became something they had to deal with later.
And then you have a truck full of football helmets sitting there.
Exactly.
That you can't use.
So the thing is, the general public wants to help, and it's absolutely wonderful that they do, and it's from the best of, heartfelt desire that they do. But the thing is, they need to help in such a way that the responders can use what they give them. For Haiti, through proper channels, something like cash gifts are a real good way, because then the agencies can spend it on what they do need at the time, and usually they're getting a very good deal through their vendors.
Oh, it makes sense, because then there's, that way they're getting exactly what they need, as opposed to, this is what I have laying around available to me. Here, you can have that.
Right.
Well, that's great, but it might not be the right thing for the. Now, do you have, obviously you've got resource management here in Fairfield that we do. You have people management and the time management that comes with that.
Right.
It's amazing. What is an average person, myself or anybody else here in Fairfield, need to know? When is something, you talked about the definition of disaster, but when is it as a disaster? When should I do something, and when should I just stand down and wait?
Well, are you talking for your own purposes or for the general public?
I am talking for, if FPAC can be of assistance by getting information out, that's great, and I will always make that available in any way, shape, or form.
And that is needed. Getting information to the public is key, and it's not always something that can be done quickly.
One of the things that we've got going on right across the bottom of the screen here is the FPAC scroll, and what I would not only use that, but be more than happy in the event of something where you would need us to let us know. We will suspend all programming and put a notice right on the middle of the screen, so that when somebody goes to that channel, it's right there.
Okay, that'd be very helpful.
That's instant information. We've got radio stations. We've got now. Take FPAC out of the equation, because I'm happy to help from that perspective. But if I'm a citizen in the general public, and I am, other than needing to get that information either from FPAC or radio station or some method, then what do I do?
Things like the NOAA weather radio.
Okay.
Many of our exposures are weather related, be it flood, tornado, thunderstorm, hail, whatever. Your NOAA weather radio is a source for it. They are giving constant updates of weather, and those radios are available at, well, I like to say all of the marts. I very seldom will say a specific store because a lot of stores have them.
Okay.
And it just depends on what radio you prefer, just like buying a television or a stereo or whatever. You need to look at them and determine what factors you have. One of the things that is nice is programmability. If that radio can be programmed, then you can program in and out what you don't want to listen to. If there's an alert for a tsunami, it's not going to help here much.
Not too much.
But you may want the thunderstorms, you may want the tornadoes.
No, more than likely, especially in our area of the world.
Exactly. And you can usually program which stations you receive it from.
Okay.
We have one here in Fairfield, but perhaps you want to hear them from northern Missouri also, because a lot of our storms come from the south and west.
And normally on the NOAA, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but they also have instructions.
Yes.
They'll tell me, okay, we have severe weather, please don't drive, please get to a central location, and so it has some instructions.
Exactly.
Which are very, very good to follow. But, so what happened, say a disaster occurs in Fairfield, be it severe weather, be it, what happens, obviously before even that has happened, you talked about training, and I'm guessing there is some coordination that's gone on beforehand.
Yes. The planning for these disasters goes on almost constantly.
Okay.
In Jefferson County, we have what we call a planning group that gets together once a month and discusses various things that are needed, not needed. Did you arrange for this? Yes or no? For example, a hospital may take a certain group of items that are needed and take care of those. Public health might do some, the sheriff's department might do some, the police department I might do some.
Okay.
It's just a way of getting more agencies and people involved to plan for what might happen. Now, the one thing is our plans, and really any plans for a disaster, can't be too specific. The reason being we don't know exactly what that disaster is going to be made up of.
Okay.
Kind
of like having all the pieces to the puzzle, but not knowing what the final picture is going to look like.
Exactly. Let's say a tornado is coming this way. We don't know if it's going to miss us entirely. We don't know if it's going to hit a little bit of town. We don't know if it's going to wipe the whole town out like it did in Parkersburg.
Right.
And it's impossible to cover all the bases for all the different variables that enter in.
Okay.
So what you need to do is have a basic general plan, and then the responders kick into their portion of the response, and as they get steps taken care of along those lines, then you bring the plan down to a more finite point as to what you need for that given disaster.
Now, so if I'm understanding you correctly, well, first off, there's training involved and there's planning involved, but really there's another portion that kicks in as the disaster is happening.
Right.
And during and post disaster, if you will. Now, is there a kind of a central command, or how do we coordinate those efforts?
One way is we have what's known as an EOC, it's Emergency Operating Center. And department heads, or at least decision makers from the departments, will get together as needed in that EOC. And as problems come up, they handle them.
Okay.
If it takes more than one department, they can discuss it right there and say, okay, here's what we need to do. Then they can pass that out to the incident command that's out in the field actually working on the situation as it
Okay.
develops.
And so that there's basically management along the way that would happen from the different department heads or different groups that might need to be able to make a decision, be it the hospital, be it fire, be it police, be it any of the above.
Right, and there may be 20 people in the EOC, depending if it's a big enough disaster. There may be as few as 2 or 3 if it's a very specific
Okay.
situation that they can handle.
Now, in addition to having real disasters, do you practice disasters?
Yes, and as far as that goes, the county probably doesn't know this, but the end of January, we had a full week disaster, which was a simulated disaster hooked to the H1N1 flu virus.
Okay. And so, simulating the disaster, what happens then?
We try to go through the events. Obviously, the time frame is altered, but we try to go through the events just like they are happening.
Okay.
We try and simulate it as realistically as possible, even recognizing that it's a made-up scenario.
Okay.
But there we started with a very little bit. Through the first few days, it increased until it became more of a disaster. We opened the EOC and operated from that to dispense vaccine and so forth.
And so basically is it a full-scale operation as if something had happened. That way, in the event something does, you've practiced it, you're ready for it.
Right. And we'll do other things too. That just happened to be a public health exercise. We may do a train wreck. We may do a pipeline explosion. Just about anything that we think of. Terrorism is a big one right now as far as exercising, and just a variety of different things so that the responders' minds are geared towards a variety of responses.
That coupled with, as you said, you had people going through training classes. Is there ongoing training for different personnel in this area?
Yes, each department has their own training they go to. Then there are other, such as this class on officer safety, that is made available, and I say, yes, I want to have it here, and organize that class for whoever needs to come to it.
That's fantastic. Now, this is so neat because, Jerry, all this stuff that is very, very poignant in your world is new to mine because, as I said, you see the police cruiser go by and you see something happen and you realize people should take care of that, but there's always this stigma that somebody else will deal with it. Mm-hmm. It's nice to know that somebody else has planned for it, but what does somebody do if they want to become involved or help out, or is this something that I should probably wait till I'm asked?
Yes.
Okay.
It is real good to have, shall I say, a cadre of volunteers ready to go.
Okay.
And that is a goal of probably all the counties. However, the big problem we run into is people tend to lose interest. What is exciting today may be a total bore next week.
Fair enough.
And having something to keep the interest peaked is a real problem.
So what kind of volunteers are you talking about, Jerry? Is that just somebody that, assists with information, somebody who ends up, becoming a responder? I guess what are we looking for as far as volunteers?
There again, the answer is yes.
Okay.
We're basically, if there is a disaster occurs, there is a need for a lot of different things. If we have someone come in that's handicapped, that is not a real problem. The big thing is if we can get them hooked up so that perhaps they can sit at a desk and keep records so that when FEMA enters, if they do, we have the records in place and ready to go. Checking in responders, checking out responders, keeping a log of what equipment is where.
That sounds like all pretty important stuff when it comes down to.
Actually, during the disaster, it doesn't seem to be very important. But as soon as things settle down just a little bit, then it becomes critical.
Hey, where did that go? I don't know.
During the flooding 2 years ago, the state lost 2 8-inch pumps at $50,000 each.
Lost. Oops.
Yeah, and the thing is, things were going hot and heavy for, well, quite a few days.
Right.
And somebody just forgot to write something down.
So they're out there somewhere. Somebody has them.
They
Whether it was an intentional theft or somebody put it away where nobody else could find it.
Yeah, and very likely that's what happened. Some employee said, well, that doesn't need to be sitting in the street, pulled it in and set it in a equipment shed somewhere, and it's probably still sitting there, and the people who knew it was there think the right people picked it up, and it's just, now if we ever have the floods again, they'll probably show up.
No, exactly. But until that time, we're not knowing where. That's got to be huge, especially when you have, equipment and people management. So it sounds like communication is a very, very key issue.
Yes, and that's something we work on very hard. People and responders, for that matter, have a tendency to say, well, we'll use our cell phones. Well, possibly.
Okay.
If the cell tower is not functional, or if it's overloaded, they're not going to use their cell phones.
Yeah, it seems like a disaster would be a fine time for every person that has a cell phone to be calling somebody else.
Right, they want to call Aunt Maud and say, we're okay, we're at such and such.
Yes.
Which is a good and it's a valuable call, but it takes that much out of the cell phone tower.
And when thousands of people all take that much out, we've used it up.
Right, and there have been cases where it locked them up completely to where the cell phone company had to go and do whatever they do maintenance-wise to get it back going again.
Wow.
There is another thing that is not commonly known. If it is a serious enough disaster, the federal government can shut down the cell phone system.
So they have the ability to communicate, and shutting down the cell phones just ensures that the other systems aren't clogged.
Normally, this would not be done on anything other than a terrorist situation.
Okay.
And this is something that developed since 9/11. And the reason is they have identified that the terrorists like to use throwaway cell phones.
Well, makes sense. You can't trace them, plus they're great means to communicate.
Right. So their feeling is if they shut down the cell phone system, they've shut down their communication and possibly short-circuited some more action on their part.
That's fantastic. But it's not something, you're right, not commonly known, not something anybody would think about.
People would be amazed at it, and I am too, at the technology that the government has at their disposal.
But saving it for the right event at the right time, at
Right.
the right, wow.
They're not going to do it because we have a tornado. No. But if there is something serious enough, for example, in 9/11, they shut down all air travel. And they did it rapidly, and they kept it down for X length of time. It's the same way with this. If they've determined that it has to be done, they'll do it.
Wow. So there is a federal level to this, a state level, and a local level to emergency management.
Right.
Now, are there mandates that come from a federal and a state level, or guidelines, or how does that, as opposed to the local side reinventing the wheel in every small community around the United States?
Well, actually, that does happen quite a bit because it gets passed down to us that we have to do this, this, and this. And sometimes there's guidelines on exactly how to do it.
Okay.
But most times they just say you need to have a plan for this. And it's up to us to do that. and then down the road a year or two, then they come out with some guidelines and we have to redo it. But a lot of it is federal guidelines due to changes in Washington
Okay.
that are fed down to the state. The state, I will give them credit, they try and buffer it to us as much as they can.
Okay.
But then they pass it down to the county level and the coordinators have to comply with it. So it's a flow down type of thing that way.
So in addition to having different regulations and guidelines, you have to, in other words, you're told it's ice cream, and then you have to find the right flavor for our county.
That's pretty much a good example.
Okay. We're coming up, we've got about 5 minutes left, Jerry. Is there anything that, it's an interesting platform we have here because we have the opportunity to reach basically every television set that's on the cable system, whether it be Lisco or MediaCab. And we also have the ability, I think we are the only public access television station in the United States at the moment that broadcasts 24/7 on the internet. Okay. So it's kind of neat because when we broadcast something, my parents are down in Quincy, Illinois. And if we're doing something where it was a concert and one of my daughters was in it, they can just get on there and see it. So literally people from about anywhere, part of our community or people that are coming back to our community, or all kinds of, I had a call one time from California saying, when is this show going to be on again? Because I want to watch it. And I'm like, just that kind of reach is amazing. But at the same time, what would you say, obviously we're now talking at the citizen level, what do people need to know?
I would say the biggest thing is be prepared and be at least somewhat patient. By be prepared, the government can't be here in less than probably 72 hours. And our local resources can only stretch so far. We don't know what kind of disaster you might have, whether it be tornado. It's probably going to be weather related, but if you have a backpack for maybe each member of your house that has some non-perishable food in it, has a change or two of clothing in it, has some toothpaste, shampoo, whatever in it, so that you have some supplies to get you through that period, because it may very well be a just grab and run type of thing to evacuate your home. Or if you're in your home, that's fine, you've still got that stuff. During ice storms, that type of thing, we generally suggest you shelter at home even if you don't have power. The reason being, you've got blankets there, you've got your food there, you've got all of your creature comforts, whether they work or not. If you would go to a shelter, all you're going to have is a cot, a blanket, and a pillow, and whatever you carried in maybe in your knapsack. At least at home, if you're cold, you can throw extra blankets on. Plus, that way you don't have to go out onto the ice and try and drive somewhere. So you're staying a little safer that way. Not saying that you won't have to leave, but at least that way you've got the things you're used to around you. This goes for summer, it goes for winter. Possibly in the winter, that safety kit might include some other things than they would in the summer. That's kind of up to you. You should have a little water available. The stores might not be open. Whatever you need to get through 2 or 3 days at least with as little outside help as possible.
You also said be patient.
We are working feverishly on whatever level it is to get things as normal as possible. Get your power back, get your phone back, get to you to evacuate you, whatever. We're coming, it's just a matter of we can't be everywhere at once.
So in other words, find the way to, get the information. So I love this idea of having a backpack for the members of the household and then having additional things, first aid, battery operated radio, flashlight, and a home emergency kit.
Right.
But that would be portable. See, we've got one at home, but I never thought about the need to grab it and go.
Yeah, and if you have a legitimate emergency and need assistance right away and have a phone, don't hesitate to call 911. But if it's a general information thing, if it's something that isn't a immediate emergency, please just be patient and don't call the 911 because those operators are extremely busy during a situation like that.
That's fantastic. Jerry, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing this with us, because this is, as you said, another behind the scenes thing that to be honest, until now, I never considered all the stuff that was happening back there. Jerry, thank you for all you do for our community.
Well, glad to do it.
Appreciate it, Jerry.
You bet.
Again, you've been watching Stuff here on Channel 9, Fairfield Public Access Television. Thanks again, and have a great day.